Our text is from the gospel reading. And Pilate said unto them, What then shall I do with this Jesus, who is called Christ? It was dark in the filthy dungeon where they had thrown Barabbas. And it was dark in his filthy, murderous heart. Soon they would be coming to take him. And he shuddered at the thought of it, cursed a foul oath, spat in the corner. Barabbas had seen other men crucified, and he had laughed at them, their squirming torment, hoarse cries, unspeakable thirst, covered with blood, crawling with insects, naked against the sky. What fools they were to get caught. But now Barabbas had been caught. And what would he do? Start blubbering when the iron spikes stabbed through his own flesh? But when? Today? Tomorrow? Next week? He wished they would get it over. Then he heard the sound of footsteps in the corridor. Hobnail boots on the cobblestone made his blood run cold. The clattering of a key in the lock. The heavy bolt pulled back. The creaking of rusty hinges as the door swung open. And flickering torchlight fell on the face of Barabbas, terrorist and manslayer. But wait, there are no soldiers. Only the turnkey, who is saying, You are free to go, Barabbas. What was this? Some cruel kind of joke? As his eyes darted nervously from the jailer's face to the sinister shadows out there in the corridor. Free to go? Walk out of here, right? What's the catch? Why? Because, Barabbas, another man is going to die in your place. Did Barabbas understand that? If his name meant anything, and Hebrew names often did, Barabbas means son of a rabbi. Did he recall the words that his father and rabbi taught him as a little boy? He was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. All we like sheep have gone astray, and the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. Did Barabbas ever think of that? Did he draw the line from Jesus to himself and see in that strange substitution the just for the unjust a picture of his salvation? Did he remember the man to whom he owed his life? We cannot answer for Barabbas. We can only answer for ourselves. The Barabbas incident was just one more weird turn in a trial full of weird turns. From the start, the Jews were determined that the prisoner be put to death, and they said so. We found this fellow subverting our nation, protesting the paying of taxes to Caesar, and saying that he is Christ, the King. And from the first, The Roman governor was determined to set the prisoner free, and he said so. I find no fault in this man at all. But Pilate was in a tight spot. For 6 years, he had served his emperor in this God-forsaken province, and his only job was to preserve the peace and avoid violence at all costs. But he also knew the Jews. They were capable of incredible fanaticism, rioting, bloody street fighting at the drop of a hat. Well, they had done it before. Twice. Once when Pilate put the Roman eagles high on the walls of the temple, and again when he tried to bring fresh water into the city out of temple funds. And now things were dangerously close to the edge again. The city was filled to overflowing with pilgrims from every corner. A veritable powder keg. And the slightest spark could set it off. Pilate tried. Give the guy credit for that much. Everything he could think of, he tried. He tried to change a venue. Hearing that Jesus was a Galilean, he sent him to the Galilean King Herod, who just happened to be in the city for the holiday, hoping he would accept jurisdiction in the case, but no. Herod sent the prisoner right back. He tried plucking the strings of sympathy, throwing the prisoner on the mercy of the court. He had Jesus scourged, stripped, bent bareback over a sawhorse, and whipped with leather thongs laced with sharp pieces of metal, which lacerated the flesh and the sinew right down to the bone. Behold the man, Pilate said. There was no horrified silence, no gasps of pity. That didn't work. So he tried the old cop-out of mental incompetency. He had his soldiers dress Jesus up in a tattered old robe, put a crown of thorns on his head, and stuck a broomstick between his bound hands as a scepter. And then they bowed down before him. Hail, King of the Jews. And that didn't work. Pilate was stymied. The hot sun's beating down on his head. The air in the courtyard suffocating from the throng of many bodies. That incessant clamoring of that Jewish crowd jangled his nerves. Fist fighting was breaking out on the perimeter. And it didn't help matters at all when just then a courier approached the bench with an urgent message for the governor. It was from his wife, of all people, and it read, "Have thou nothing to do with that just man? For I have suffered many things this day in a dream because of him." Oh, brother, that's all a guy needs is his wife telling him how to do his job. It's just a footnote in the story, and in the end it doesn't change a thing, but it was not a footnote to the woman who sent that message. We don't know what she dreamed, but we all know, even the smallest child, how terrifying dreams can be. An odd mixture of the real and the unreal, filling our souls with a sense of dark foreboding. Did she dream that horrifying scene that was at this moment unfolding in her husband's courtyard? Did she see the faces without number through the centuries shaking their heads at this travesty of justice? Did she hear the name of that proud Roman whom she loved shamefully repeated forever in the words of the Apostles' Creed, suffered under Pontius Pilate? Her felt duty to help him was no dream. With all the instincts of a true-hearted woman, she knew her husband was in peril, and she wanted him to know it too. And then, quite by accident, the Jews let slip what they really had against Jesus. We have a law, by the law, he had to die because he made himself the Son of God. That was a new charge. They didn't mention that before. And it startled Pilate. Son of God. Is that what all this fuss is about? Is that what my wife tried to warn me about? There was something unusual about the prisoner. Here stands a man, bloody and beaten and surrounded by scoffers, dragged from pillar to post, denounced and derided, buffeted and spat upon. And he remains the center of every scene, dwarfing all those around him in their petty malice. And the more they try to belittle him, the higher he towers over them. So confident he is of his innocence, so unafraid of death. He must have come from another world, must have another homeland. And who can ever rule out the supernatural? Pilate had one more ace up his sleeve. The Jews accused Jesus of being a rebel and disturber of the peace. Okay. Pilate has in his prison a man who has done this very thing. A political terrorist and an assassin. And if these Jews really fear political unrest and bloodshed in the street, they have more to fear from Barabbas than from any other man. You can't say with certainty where the custom came from. In Michigan, the governors pardoned a notable prisoner every year at Christmas time, and Ronald Reagan did the same thing when he was governor of California. But Pilate wasn't prepared for the choice. Release unto us Barabbas! What then shall we do with this Jesus who is called Christ? And the blood-chilling scream came back. Crucify him! Crucify him! There was one more thing Pilate could have done. The right thing. And if you and I can think of it, that thought surely passed through Pilate's mind. All he had to do was make a gesture with his hand to the centurion. And those guardsmen would have cleaned the courtyard out in a heartbeat and loved doing it, bashing a few Jewish skulls with Roman shields. But then the Jews played their trump card. If thou let this man go, thou art not Caesar's friend. We'll go over your head. We'll charge you with malfeasance before the seat of Caesar. We'll be lying. We'll know it and you'll know it. But Caesar won't know it. We'll have your job. And it was all over. He washed his hands in a basin of water. And that was it. Some say that if Pilate did not do well, he did at least as well as anybody could, given that situation. There is no special condemnation of Pilate in the text. It's almost as though the authors of the gospel have sympathized with this fellow human being caught on the horns of a cruel dilemma. So very real and almost impossible to handle wisely. There is also this evidence. Jesus had an open scorn for Herod, whom he once called an animal, and to whom he refused to speak a single word. And he refused to make peace with the religious leaders and reserved for them his most blistering language. But he was incredibly patient with Pontius Pilate. He answered every one of his searching questions. You get the impression that Jesus looked on this Roman who had so much pain in his eyes as one might look upon an eagle imprisoned incomprehendingly in an iron cage, flapping this way and that way, helplessly and in vain. Let your imagination run. If your spouse ever sent to you a message as Pilate's wife sent to him, you know. You ain't heard the end of it yet. When Pilate came home that evening, she was waiting for him. How was your day, dear? Did you get my message? Well, what did you do? Did he brush it off? It's none of the woman's business. Did he bluster his way through about keeping the peace in the province? Or, one hopes, did he tell her the truth? What do you mean, what did I do? I did what everybody's done. I laid my sins on Jesus. What else can anyone ever do? Amen.